All right. I will go ahead and kick things off. I want to thank everybody for attending today. It looks like we have a really good turnout for this exciting topic that we're all anticipating hearing more about. Before we get started, I want to give a little bit of information about us and about what we do. We are the NASIG Continuing Education Committee, and I want to welcome you to this month's session for the Continuing Education webinar series. We'll have a slide at the end where we'll share more information about some of these links that I'll be talking about. We do have a CEC webinar archive. You can find that at nasig.org/webinars. We also have a YouTube channel at youtube.com at nasig3161. We'll put the link in the chat for this as well so that you have that information. I do want to remind you that at the end of the session, we will have a survey that pops up and would really appreciate your feedback when you see that. And one more thing that I'll point out, we do have an upcoming webinar next year called Transforming Library Data Analytics into Strategic Insights with ChatGPT. And we anticipate that being a really popular session as well. So with that, I will turn it over to introduce the speaker and the topic today.
All right. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Joanne Sam, the Electronic Resources Acquisition Licensing Librarian at Duke University Libraries. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Regina Romano Reynolds. Regina is the director of the US ISSN Center and head of the ISSN Section at the Library Congress, where she works at the intersection of libraries, publishing, and information standards. She is an influential voice in bibliographic control and has contributed to initiatives like the development of BIBFRAME and the advancement of linked data. Regina is also deeply involved in international standards, playing key roles in revisions of the ISSN standard and other periodical standards. A recipient of Ulrich's Serials Librarianship Award, she is a respected writer and speaker in the field. Please join me in welcoming Regina Romano Reynolds. And Regina, here you go.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. And everyone, thank you for being here. I had fun putting this presentation together for you, so I hope you will have a little fun watching it. I've got a lot to say, but I'm going to keep my eye on the clock to allow up to 10 minutes at the end for questions, maybe even a few more. So let me first get the slides going and, oh, great. Here we go. What lies ahead? So I've got a little movie theme going on here. The background I have is from the Library of Congress Audiovisual Conservation Center, where they have a beautiful traditional little theater. That's the backdrop here. And I recently have gotten kind of interested in film noir. And so you'll see some illustrations here, because it seems like right now in the scholarly landscape, we've got some good actors and bad actors. I first wrote good guys and bad guys, but it's not just guys. And my European colleagues sometimes talk about bad actors. So actors has got a couple meanings here. Now, the dark and stormy sentence, such a cliche now, actually goes back to a novel in 1830. And the subject is a robber. And I'm going to talk about some robberies of ISSNs, if you can believe that. And detective work we have to do sometimes. Crime magazines, a surprising genre in the portal. ISSN mysteries, secrets books, plural, secrets, and coming attractions. And this isn't exactly in the order, and I'm going to intersperse some stories and maybe go down a few rabbit holes on the way, but let's get started. So, yeah, I almost wanted to put one of those disclaimers or those warnings. You know, you might be disturbed by this content, because I find it disturbing that in the scholarly landscape now, there are more scams and more bad actors, bad stuff than I can remember in many years that I've been working. And I hate to say it, but I think that as wonderful as open access has been, the pay to publish has also inspired some of these bad actors to say, oh, we can make some quick money. We'll just start a journal. Sounds like that old Judy Garland cliche. Oh, let's put on a show. Let's start a journal. Like these days, it is pretty easy. You don't have to have a printer and an expense and distributors. So a lot of bad actors, sadly, have really gotten into this. We've had to deal with fake addresses. I'll talk more about them, theft, disputes, hijackings, and it's actually called journals that are being hijacked. The latest has been harmful URLs, and any day something new and not ideal might come on the horizon. Well, it certainly keeps all of us in the US ISSN Center and the ISSN network from getting bored. There's no end to the challenges, which is great. I enjoy coming to work every day. I don't know what's going to come across my desk. So predatory publishing is something that I know it has been with us for over 10 years. And I've given multiple presentations about it and about the effect on the ISSN network. And it got to the point a few years ago, I call pre-pandemic. Everything seems to now be like pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic. Anyway, it was really so bad with ISSN staff trying to deny ISSNs to people that seem to be fit the predatory definition of taking advantage. But they would push back. We would be spending as much time denying ISSNs as we were assigning them. And it was like, what's wrong with this picture? And staff would get very stressed because they'd get into arguments with publishers. I had one publisher because I'm always the buck stops here kind of person. And it was so upsetting to be accused of being prejudiced and causing harm, and when we were really just trying to fulfill what we thought was an appropriate role. So, being a graduate of the University of Michigan Library School and getting all these offers to have students do projects for your library, I hatched a project to study whether ISSN centers were doing more harm than good in trying to deny ISSNs to publishers we felt were predatory. And our students worked during the pandemic, 2 U of M students and 1 Library of Congress intern, and they interviewed people from DOAJ and Crossref, Latindex, a variety of databases or intermediaries, I like to call them, and really asked some tough questions. The conclusion was interesting and very helpful for us because the conclusion was, ISSN people, go ahead and assign these publications ISSNs. You're providing us with metadata about them. You're providing a unique identifier to distinguish these very generic and common types of journal titles, Journal of Artificial Intelligence whatsoever, and just keep going. We, DOAJ, we, Scopus, we, Crossref, and not necessarily Crossref, but the indexers, it's our job to be gatekeepers, to have quality publications into our databases. So you let us know they're out there. You give us the metadata. We'll do the gatekeeping. What a relief. It really took a lot of stress away. But we still have various kinds of stressors in this robbery, and I'm using that word because it goes back to dark and stormy night, but this robbery situation, these thefts, these disputes have caused a great deal of angst. So some might say, why would anybody fight over an ISSN? It's a dumb number, as I've often been used to calling it. Why fight? It's just a number. Well, it actually has come to have value because it is associated with the reputation of a journal, with the impact factor of a journal, with citations to it. So it's come to have value that probably was never foreseen over 50 years ago when it was launched as an identifier. But in recent years, there has literally been disputes, fights, lawsuits. I have had legal dossiers land on my desk about two publishers fighting over a set of ISSNs because they had a rift and didn't get it settled. And of course, this is a little stressful. And in this particular case, it went pretty high in the government, above my pay grade. Sometimes publishers will actually just steal an ISSN and put it on their journal with the same title, with the same logo. And that one has come to be called a hijacking, where now you have two publications, both using the same ISSN and title, different content. And after trying to figure out how to cope with this, because the complaints land on our doorstep or my desk, and it made us feel very responsible for deciding, well, who gets the ISSN? And then we kind of came to the realization, well, no, especially in the review group. So the ISSN Review Group sets ISSN policies, etc. And we started thinking about the fact that our role is identification. Our role is creating the metadata, which is on the publication. Our role, our expertise, and our responsibility is not to settle these disputes. So we've come to the conclusion that we must ask the publishers, you all need to resolve, it's an intellectual property dispute. Is the title trademarked, in which case other people can't use it? If it's not, you can still protest that the other journal that hijacked your title in ISSN is harming you. But we will give you time to resolve these disputes. And if you cannot, the sad outcome, and it frustrates me because it will kind of mess up the scholarly record, I think. But in the worst case of two publications using the same title and the same ISSNs for different content, we will, if they can't resolve this, have no choice after a stated period of time, 6 to 9 months, to cancel those ISSNs that are under dispute. Say that title split into A and B, give them qualified key titles and new ISSNs. So we'll see how that works out. This solution is being proposed in the revised ISSN manual that will be released to the network in January, we hope January, and we'll get a reaction. But right now, that's sort of one way to solve robberies and thefts and hijackings. Now, just when we thought nothing else could come down the pike, we've had a spate of malicious URLs. We've got software at the library called Palo Alto. It screens URLs and it will block us from looking at a journal on a potentially harmful site. All these different kinds of spywares and malwares, and this thing called park domains, which seems to not be as serious as malware. So we're right now working on asking the publisher, we can't look at your publication. And even if we could, then we still have to put this URL into our catalog record that will go all around the world. And we can't risk harming people's systems. So we've asked publishers to either clean up their URL or we can't give them an ISSN. So this is a new challenge for the center and the network. And who knows, tomorrow there'll be something else. So detectives, well, even when we have tried to shrug off the role or not cast off the role of solving disputes, we still, like all good serialists, have to do some detective work from time to time. So we need to know, well, if there is no stated publisher on this resource, who are you? And please put your publisher name on it. Likewise, in order to assign an ISSN, a US ISSN, we have to have a place of publication on the issue that is in the US. So where do you live? Now, some of these possibly predatory publishers will give us an address in Lewis, Delaware, where it's possible to incorporate for a very small amount of money, even if you live in abroad, somewhere other else in the world. We have Googled some of the addresses we're given, and sometimes it's literally in a cornfield, often in a shopping mall. And there could be a legitimate self-publisher living in this particular house, maybe not in the field, but we try to track down some of this. We used to be really tying ourselves in knots over, will the real XYZ journal please please stand up, please let us know. We're trying a different resolution, since we really aren't the arbiter or the solver of legal disputes. But like other serial catalogers, we try to get the former publisher, the former title, and often things just crop up. But staff has sometimes been known to say here, we can't be the ISSN police. And that's very true, but sometimes we are the ISSN detectives. Now, there is good stuff. There is a little help in terms of trying to combat some of these problems. There's an organization called Think, Check, Submit. Just Google it. That gives a lot of information to beginning researchers, people who are looking for a place to publish, to tell them how to spot low quality or predatory. There's the Committee on Publication Ethics, COPE. They have a website, they have a digest. NISO's Transfer Code of Practice gives some guidance about transfers, because that's one of the ways that some of these scams can happen. If we at a US ISSN Center get a request from a, quote, receiving publisher, oh yes, I've just taken possession of journal ABC, please change my record to reflect this change of publisher. Well, now we are requesting documentation. Can we hear from the former publisher that they have truly transferred it to you? Can we see some documentation that you really are the rightful publisher of this journal? It's very cumbersome. In some cases, we can't always get in touch with the former publisher. They might have actually abandoned the publication and somebody else jumped on it. But these are just some of the more or less everyday challenges that we have that I think in former times was much less common, but the online environment now is just given rise to some of these problems or multiplying them. So the Retraction Watch folks, which deal with retracted articles, also have a hijacked journal checker. It's a list they maintain of hijacked journals, so they're very aware. The last time I looked, there were some 100 titles on this list. And like I said, the indexing services are really watching out for the quality of what goes into them. So famous noir title movie is called Out of the Past. And watching these movies and some of the things in them kind of reminded me of some old-time things that ISSN used to get into. And one of them is telexes. In these movies, it's more telegrams. But subsequent to that, there was this machine that sent over the wires, I believe, these short messages. And back in the day, ISSN centers that needed to communicate quickly, international phone calls were far too expensive, and the phones were fixed so that we couldn't call Paris. So we would type a form out and then bring it to the basement where there were one of these machines to communicate quickly with another center. Of course, today, telex gave way to fax, which gave way now to all our multiple daily email interactions. It seldom a day goes by that we are not in touch with someone around the world about ISSN work. It makes it intriguing and interesting and very satisfying. I do have a fact story, but stay tuned on that one. I'll get to it. Oh, the other thing that these movies, there's always so much smoking in these films. And it made me wonder, all right, what do we have in the portal on just smoking? And by the way, the ISSN portal has the ability to search a word anywhere in a record. So I did smoking and came up with, oh, what did I say here? A goodly number of publications with smoking in their titles. This one intrigued me, Smoking Singles. And we've got Janis Joplin here. And we do have this with all the abbreviated titles and a Dewey subject. And it started in 1990. So you never know what you're going to find in the ISSN portal. Yep, smoking was a thing. And smoking was a big thing. When I first started in the ISSN work, because at the time we were in the Adams building because the medicine wasn't open yet, and smoking was allowed. There were some managers on the floor below us that were able to smoke in their offices, and that got extended to our long and narrow bowling alley. And I was very taken aback on my first couple days with the smoke-filled room. And then when I went to my first ISSN meeting, lo and behold, there was smoking all around the table. It was really definitely troubling for those of us who didn't smoke and weren't very happy to be in a smoke-filled room. But one smoking anecdote was that an ISSN director, who was only a director for a relatively short while, she got another job, but she was a very heavy smoker. And every break, she'd run out into the outside to smoke, or this was after we weren't smoking in the conference room. So we had an observer who was very, very loquacious, just nonstop talker. He got up to talk once. She grabbed her cigarettes, ran out of the room, came back a while later, and he was still talking. So smoking is very linked in my mind with ISSN meetings, and just a little bit of history in the past. So now on to various genres and media that we're now covering. Again, back in the day, it was print serials. Today, it is print, online, and even podcasts, even sound recording as a medium that we will cover. And in my research here, I stumbled across perhaps the most well-known true crime podcast ever called Serial. Well, this serial definitely demands an international standard serial number, if any did. So we'll try to get in touch with these folks. They've been around since apparently 2014. and offer them an ISSN. We're getting our feet wet just now with podcasts, but this is too good to pass up. By the way, if any of you have some experience with the serial called Serial, put it in the chat and we'll maybe talk about it during the Q&A. So podcasts, here is, first of all, I just want to remind everyone of all the things that we now cover and encourage those with an institutional repository at their university or a blog that, yes, they can have an ISSN and we'd be happy to assign them. Also various databases and integrating resources. We're there with these, and now podcasts. So this is just one early example. It's called the Sprocket Podcast. Interesting. I have to look it up. The subject is moral philosophy, ethics, practical philosophy. Sounds very intriguing, but we're working on developing a template that shows us the coding, lots of coding for sound recordings, and even putting it into the revised ISSN manual, which is going to give more information about how to work with some of these resources. And blogs have been interesting in that we've encountered some blogs that simply have the title blog, which is a generic. So then it might need to be qualified by a person's name. If this is the blog of a personal expert, which we will give ISSN, not just a personal everyday, I woke up and applied for an ISSN kind of blog, but someone with an expert subject and that really is the single author. So their title blog will be qualified by a personal name, which is a departure for ISSN. We've also got many hits on the word crime, seeing as I was into the crime aspects of this presentation. 1477. This first listing, I searched on true crime, and there are versions of true crime magazines, Italy, New Zealand, Hungary, Canada, Finland, and that was just one screen. Most of the 1400, of course, are actual about crime statistics, crime prevention, the psychology of crime, but this one that is French and goes back to 1846 was digitized for inclusion in Gallica, the French repository. Le Crime, very, very interesting for Francophile and a film noir file like my fan like myself. And then we come to this genre. Well, what we could call this genre of women or men in scanty attire, of which Playboy is kind of the poster child. But Playboy over the years has been a very big customer of ISSN's because they spun off a lot of subseries, or not literal subseries, but had spin-offs like, you know, Playboy College Girls and Playboy this and that. And when I did this search, I really was intrigued by the ability of the portal to map the locations around the world, and by the numbers, 124 results. And here, this little cluster in the New York area, there's clusters in, this looks like it's probably New Zealand, and lots in Europe, and here's one in Africa. I mean, it's just very intriguing to me. And we can see here, of course, yes, there were a lot of female pin-up types also in film noir. But here we go again, just a selection of Playboys from Slovenia, Hungary, Spain, South Africa. It's very intriguing what you can find if you start poking around in the ISSN portal. under all kinds of interesting subjects. But moving along to mysterious ISSNs. Who knows? Maybe this Maltese falcon statuette has hidden ISSNs in the base. Who knows? Speaking of which, the Library of Congress has one of the statuettes that supposedly was used in the movie, and it can be just seen in a display near the Copyright Office, public office where people can go and sit down and talk to someone about copyright. So let's see what we have here for mysterious ISSNs. Well, one that you may or may not be familiar with are a group of legacy ISSNs. They can be identified in the portal by having their title in all caps and by having a legacy status. They go back to the precursor almost of ISSN registration by the Bowker Company that was commissioned to create a critical mass of serials with ISSNs. The idea was we got to get all these publications already into a database in order to get this thing off the ground. Sadly, really very sadly, it sounded like a good idea at the time, you know, one of those, it sounds like a good idea. Many have never been validated. Also, because it was put together with a combination of the 1970s and 72 Ulrichs and the 50 to 70 new serial titles accumulation, there is more than some duplication. There's a lot of overlap. Here's an NST ISSN, here's an Ulrichs ISSN, here's a third one because NST used corporate main entry for some things that Ulrichs put under title. Oh, it's kind of sad. I don't know what the ultimate outcome will be, and I see I repeated many not still validated because it really bothers me. And to quote a very famous noir title, it's definitely out of the past, but unfortunately it's also into the present. So here's an example, and you can see the title is written in all caps. It's not really a key title. We don't use the subtitle in the key title. It's a very sparse record. It has a country and a Dewey number, which I find intriguing. And this little plea that the legacy record is lacking information, help, use the button request a modification. Well, what we really want you to do, especially if it's the US, is send us a surrogate or a scan. Scan the title, the cover, the information page, send it to us, and we can then put this legacy record to rest by confirming, validating its ISSN. Also, there's a secret code for legacy ISSNs that you don't even need your secret decoder Captain Midnight for. And that is the ones beginning with a 00 are from Ulrichs. So that 00, my favorite ISSN, because it's the only one I have memorized for Publishers Weekly, starts out with these. They don't have to have 4 zeros, but if they start out with at least 2 in the first 4 digits, it's from Ulrichs. Now, the ones from 04 and 05, like this crime serial 04940377, that is from new serial titles. There are also some mystery ones with the 009s. They're still secret because we even haven't totally figured them all out yet. Okay, here's another little bit of ISSN numerology, if you will. It's that mysterious case of the letter X. It's very ominous at the end of some ISSNs. And it is because of the check digit. The last digit is actually a digit that guards against transcription errors. It has a, as you can see, multi-step formula to how to figure that out. And that last digit is the result of all this calculation. And if the calculation comes out to 10, There is the secret of the X. Oh, another type of ISSN that can be a little confusing or new are called cluster ISSNs, and we only have one in effect at the moment called the ISSN L, the linking ISSN, and it groups medium specific, the print, the online. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of uses, it uses the same digits as one in the cluster. So often it's the print ISSN digits that is also the L, but doesn't have to be. It's determined in Paris by 776 links. And really the first record of the cluster that enters the database, its 022 ISSN also becomes the ISSN L. The history ISSN is forthcoming in 2025. It's going to be in a new field 023, which is going to get all the clusters. The L's are going to be moved there. The history collocates the early and later titles using the 780 and 785, only some of the indicator values, I believe. It does not use any of the ISSNs in the cluster. We learned that wasn't a good idea. It can display a diagram, which I will show you in the forthcoming attractions. Now we're going to talk about various books of ISSN secrets. Among them is the ISSN manual currently under revision, but there are also these mysterious books. So here are the new serial titles, 50 to 70 accumulation, and here are the Ulrich's volumes, which contain the legacy ISSNs. And shame on us, we do need to get this one rebound. Up here are also very mysterious books. They are paper ledgers that date from 1972 to 2009, containing all the US ISSN assignments with pencil entries and notes that we do when it gets canceled, or if we find, even to this day, something that goes back to 1978, no, 1972, that turns out to have been a duplicate, we'll make a note in here, we'll put a line through it. We should get these digitized, but we have to get a way to be able to annotate them. I'm sure there is. But those are our magical mystery books. Updating the secrets in the ISSN manual is ongoing, but the ISSN Review Group, of which myself and Karen Ross in the US ISSN Center are members, it has members from many countries of the world, and we're going to release the revision in early 2025. Some new topics are this: once we get input from the rest of the network, this proposal about how to resolve certain disputes. We never needed it in all the 50 years of ISSN to have a chapter on how to resolve disputes, but now we do. And talking about blogs and podcasts, certain little quirks, like blogs getting qualified by a personal name. And we're updating information about the qualifiers, responsibilities for embassies, things like that. Due early 2025, and after it's approved by the network will use a wiki version, but the public, you all will have access through for a PDF version on the web. Oh, and now for the coming attractions. And again, more houses from my neighborhood. It's amazing how spooky they can be made to look. So, yes, 50 years of ISSN. In fact, the 50 years in 2025 is really celebrating the standard. So the ISO 3297 was approved in 1975, even though the US ISSN Center and the International Center were all operational in 1972. Again, that pesky pandemic got in the way of celebrating the US. But we will combine our celebration year with those of our colleagues around the world. And the celebration will be held in Paris. We see the little glimmer of the Eiffel Tower back there. I proposed that instead of the Olympic rings, we have ISSN put on the Eiffel Tower. Somehow they really didn't think that was possible. I mean, I can't believe it, but anyway, there will be a celebration in Paris. One of the other aspects is that I will, with a colleague from Brazil in the network, the head of the Brazilian ISSN Center, Tânia Assis, will be co-editing a special issue of Serials Review that will be dedicated to ISSN over the years. And if anyone is interested in proposing an article, please let me know. We expect to have various countries submitting articles. And I'm also thinking of ways to celebrate in the US. So it's going to be quite a big year for ISSN in 2025. Well, there's 2 centers in France. As a matter of fact, a lot of people confuse the French Center and the International Center, which are 2 different entities. The French National Center is at the Bibliothèque Nationale, and the International Center is standalone, not affiliated with any library, and really manages the entire network. And they are coordinating the celebration in Paris with our colleagues from the French National Center. I can't wait. It should be very cool. And so, some of the future things to come. Well, I did mention that Field 023, which is the future home of cluster ISSNs, namely the ISSN L, that's going to be moved from 022 subfield L and M. M is the canceled L. Going to be moved into field 023, which can be repeated for each type of cluster. So we'll have all the L's in one 023, and then those clusters that have an H, and not every serial belongs to a family. Not every serial has former and later, but many do. Those will have an H. And the new portal, the reimagined ISSN portal, will display on a click. You can see the ISSN H diagram. It will also allow you to see a wider diagram of all the titles that are linked to a particular title. So it's looking very interesting. I've been trying to study some of what's done here, and this is still in provisional draft type form, but they aren't paralleling the changes in the online version. And I guess the feeling is that's too much clutter, but then that doesn't give us the ISSNs of all the parallel titles. Nonetheless, this is just to illustrate the future, things that are on the horizon. The future portal will have more ability to include URIs. It'll be more poised for linked data, and we're looking forward to it probably later than the manual in 2025. So we're really excited about ISSN's future. It's been around 50 years. And for those of us who always ask, I will spare you the trouble. No, I don't think we will run out of ISSNs anytime soon, even if we are possibly around another 50 years, because in the first 50 years, we are still just beginning to use the 3rd million out of 999,999 ISSN. So we're 9,999,999. So I think we have a ways to go. maybe not 50 years, but in 50 years, you know, Chat GPT will have taken over everything, so we don't have to worry. No, I don't want to see that happening, really. Anyway, I thank you for your attention, and I do see that we have a good bit of time for questions. So I think somebody's going to monitor the questions, and I
Yes.
stand ready.
Yeah. Thank you, Regina. This is so informative and very interesting. Thanks for sharing all these Stormy stories, mysteries. On that theme, there is a question about in the case from Emmy. In the case of ISSN title robbery, why is preference not given to the publisher journal that existed first? Is it not a parent who was using the identifier first and who is trying to perform the robbery?
Well, you might think so, and at first I thought so, but in some of these cases, there has been, or there is claimed to have been, a sale or a transfer or some legitimate reason for the dispute. And that's where we get into trouble. We're not lawyers. We cannot look at, or even really, it doesn't do us any good to send us the legal documents. And sometimes they can't produce them. So publisher A and B, some of these disputes happen, for example, between a scholarly society and a commercial publisher that supposedly had an agreement to publish the journal. And when the agreement falls apart, there is this legal wrangling about whose right has been infringed. And so that's my experience at what happens. This happened many years ago to a British journal called the Bulletin of Hispanic Studies, something like that. And it was finally ended in a courtroom when a judge made that kind of Solomon-like decision that we are proposing, which is, all right, you guys, you can't come to an agreement. Your lawyers can't figure this out. I'm going to declare that nobody gets the disputed ISSN, and each party has to get a new title and new ISSN. And that's really why it isn't who got there first, but what is the legal agreement that has caused this problem to begin with. I know it's very too bad. It's puzzling.
Another question also from Emmy. Will we see any changes to existing ISSNs when the ISSNH clustering goes live? Should we be expecting to perform large updates to existing ISSNs in our library softwares?
Oh, I hope not. No, ISSN should be as permanent as your social security number, which I often compare it to. So what is supposed to happen? First of all, OCLC has agreed for Concert to take the lead of moving all the ISSN Ls into one of the, creating an O23 field and populating it with L and getting them out of the O22. Then I think that they will need a file from the ISSN International Center to populate the O22s for the ISSN H. But we need a name for the plain vanilla ISSN. The plain vanilla ISSN will remain in O22 and should not be affected in any way. But if the questioner can explain why they're worried about this wholesale disruption of ISSN, I'd be curious to know. Have we not thought of something that would be helpful to hear? What's keeping you up at night? Well, maybe you can email me. Okay.
All
Other
right.
questions? Yeah. go on.
Yes, we do have another question coming from Abby Wicks, my colleague Duke. So Abby, so I was so interested to hear what the X means in the ISSN. Same as I am. I was like, finally, I get to see, this is not a random sign, just something through calculation. That's great to hear. So Abby was asking, if there's time, would you please share a little bit more about how ISSNs are generally calculated or determined?
Okay, so the ISSN International Center is in charge of all the possible ISSNs in the universe of ISSNs, all the 9 million. And what they have done, and this does answer a question I just got this week, they have populated the portal with every possible ISSN, right? They have calculated them well, used an algorithm to calculate all of them and give each of them a stub record that says not yet assigned, something like that. So they have a place for everything. Now, when a new ISSN center comes into being, they get their first batch of ISSNs, and they pretty much dole out the ISSNs they'll take the next, let's say that's a small center, and they might not use, but I don't know, 500 a year. So they'll get the next 500 in the great universe of ISSNs that haven't been given out and give them to the new center. When that center uses them up, they'll ask for more. So the US, for example, we get about a year's worth at a time, which is about 6,000 ISSNs. And we have a database called Automated ISSN Register. We abbreviate that as the AIR. And when I say to people that don't know what I'm talking about, oh yes, we get our ISSNs from the AIR, they do a double take. Yes, from the Automated ISSN Register. It stores the block of ISSN that we're currently using. And as people assign ISSNs, they put metadata into the AIR, just title and publisher, very brief. Is it pre-pub, post-pub? Put that in there. And they then get the next available ISSN that they put into their record. Right now, our ISSN, our AIR, and our uplink, which is the publisher portal for applying for ISSNs, they don't talk to each other. And maybe down the road, we'll get them to talk to each other so that we don't have to go back and forth. But it is true that not every ISSN we assign comes via a publisher request. We also assign ISSN as a result of an agreement with our postal service. It's also through the International Center. So I don't know how that would work, but basically the ISSN International Center doles out free ISSNs in batches to centers around the world as they're needed. So that's kind of how it works. And then they generate the cluster ISSNs with algorithms in Paris. So the first record that has 776 link in it, that 022 ISSN gets populated into the L as well. And in future, they've got a magical way. I really haven't quite figured out their magic for the ISSN that's based on the 776s and how they're getting them all grouped into what's going to be the ISSN H and put into a second iteration of field 023. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. We do have another question from Michelle, UC Davis. So what are your thoughts about effects of open access? Will there need to be a lesson in ISSN history in order to make the scholarly records useful? Do you have any other thoughts about this?
Would you mind repeating that question? I need to hear it again.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about effects of open access? So yes.
Okay. Yeah. Open access is a two-sided coin. And I think open access is here to stay, and it's a valuable, valuable asset. Just like the internet. What would we do without it? But yet the internet has made all kinds of scams and misinformation possible. So just like the open access, all the great benefits, I think that scholarship has benefited greatly from things being open, from not having these paywalls. But at the same time, it's made it so easy for the bad actors to just spin up a journal. So like the way we have breaks on the internet, things that are warning people what to be wary of, and various kinds of ways to detect and ameliorate some of the bad stuff. So now we're going to have things like Retraction Watch and the hijacking list and their think, check, submit. You know, it's going to be a balancing act, but no, I don't want open access to go away.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions coming, but I do have a question. I hope we can, make that as our last question, and then Chris will wrap us up. So my question is, you mentioned about like a podcast and blogs are getting ISSN now, right? So are there any requests for like a data sets? And a data set has become so popular right now. Have you? Yeah, can you talk a little bit?
Yeah, data set. So I think that again, we always go back to the definition of continuing resource. Is that data set going to continue getting more data indefinitely, forever? If so, perhaps it should be eligible. I'm not aware of like what kind of a format. I would think we need the machine actionable format. To my knowledge, and there could be something that slept through, but my philosophy, and we've done some debating at the international level, okay, should this be eligible? My philosophy, if it meets the definition of a continuing resource, it should be eligible. So we need a little bit more sort of looking into the challenges and the indefinite nature of whether these are intended to be added to indefinitely. But, if they really truly are going to meet the definition, then we have to look and find the cataloging challenges, etc. So not ruled out. I'm just not aware that we've done any here.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you for Regina and for sharing your wealth of knowledge. This is very helpful to learn. With that, I think Chris, you want to wrap us up?
All right. Yes. Thank you so much, Regina, for making ISSN really fascinating. I think we all want to learn more. So a follow-up session may be in order sometime in the future. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We had a really good turnout. We do want to draw your attention to this final slide. We do have the evaluation survey that I had mentioned earlier that you should see upon exiting the webinar, but there's a link there for it also. Here you can see the links for the CEC webinar archive, nasig.org/webinars, as well as our YouTube channel. And just a final reminder that we are giving another webinar early next year on transforming library data analytics into strategic insights with ChatGPT. And you see a link there for registration for that event as well. So thanks again for the presentation and for everybody attending, and we hope to see you at a future session.
Thank you all. I enjoyed this very much. And yeah, more questions, or if you just have any burning ones that you want to email me, rrey@loc.gov, I'll answer you.